Part 1. The Trading Post Encounter. The desert sun burned hot that August afternoon in 1885. Out in the middle of nowhere, between rocky hills and dusty plains of New Mexico, stood a small wooden trading post. It wasn't much to look at. Just four walls, a roof that leaked when it rained, and shelves stocked with basics: flour, coffee, tobacco, tools, and a few rifles. Robert Whitmore ran this place with his wife Helen and their boy, 15-year-old Thomas. Robert was 42, with sun-weathered skin and tired eyes that had seen too much during his years as a cavalry scout. Those days were behind him now. He'd left that life 5 years back, hoping to build something peaceful, something simple. Most days were quiet. Settlers would stop by for supplies. Sometimes Mexican traders came through with silver work and wool blankets. And yes, the Apache came too. Not often, but regular enough. They'd bring deer hides, rabbit furs, beautiful baskets woven so tight they could hold water. Robert treated them fair, same as anyone else. A trade was a trade. Helen stood in the back room that afternoon, sorting through dried beans. Thomas was outside, chopping wood for the stove. The bell above the door jingled. Robert looked up from the ledger he was writing in. 4 Apache men walked in. The leader was someone Robert recognized. His name was Chato, which meant flat nose in Spanish, but there was nothing flat about this man's presence. He stood tall, maybe 30 years old, with a face that could have been carved from the same rock that made up these mountains. 2 eagle feathers hung in his long black hair. The 3 younger men behind him watched everything with sharp eyes. Robert had seen Chato before, but they'd never spoken directly. Usually it was the older Apache, a man named Naichu, who did the trading. Something felt different today. Afternoon, Robert said, keeping his voice steady and calm. He stayed behind the counter. No sudden moves. No reaching for anything. Chato didn't return the greeting. He walked straight to the far wall where Robert displayed his rifles. There were 3 of them. An old Springfield that had seen better days. A decent Henry rifle. And then there was the Winchester. The new one. The beautiful one. Robert had saved for 8 months to buy that Winchester repeating rifle. It was a 44-40 lever action, could hold 15 rounds. The wood was polished smooth as glass. The metal gleamed even in the dim light of the trading post. He'd special ordered it from a dealer in Santa Fe. Cost him nearly every spare dollar they had. But it was an investment. A rich rancher from Texas was coming through next week. He'd already sent word that he wanted to buy the finest rifle Robert had. The man was willing to pay double what Robert spent. That money would buy winter supplies, fix the roof, maybe even get Helen the new stove she needed. Chato pointed at the Winchester. His finger was steady. His face showed nothing. "Give me the big one," he said. The words hung in the air like smoke. Robert felt his stomach drop. This wasn't a question. Wasn't an offer to trade. It was a demand. Helen appeared in the doorway from the back room. She'd heard the tone in Chato's voice. Robert caught her eye for just a second. He could see the fear there, but also trust. Whatever he decided, she'd stand with him. The 3 younger warriors spread out slightly. Not threatening exactly, but present. Watching. Waiting to see what this white man would do. Robert's mind raced. He thought about the rifle. About the money they needed. About the rancher who'd be here in 7 days expecting to buy it. He thought about winter coming and how hard last winter had been when they'd run low on everything. But he also thought about what would happen if he refused. These 4 men could take the rifle by force if they wanted. They could burn this place down. Could hurt his family. The nearest help was half a day's ride away. Yet something told Robert this wasn't just about fear. There was something else happening here. Something he didn't quite understand yet. He looked at Chato's face. Really looked. And he saw something there. Not anger. Not greed. It was something else. A test, maybe? A challenge? Robert remembered his old friend Naichu once telling him something over coffee and traded tobacco. They'd been talking about honor, about what makes a man worthy of respect. Naichu had said, "We don't judge a man by what he keeps for himself. We judge him by what he's willing to give up when it costs him something real." The words came back to Robert now like an echo across years. He took a slow breath. Then he reached up and carefully lifted the Winchester from its pegs on the wall. The rifle felt heavy in his hands. Heavier than it should. He checked it over once, the way you do when you're showing respect for a fine weapon. Then he walked around the counter. Chato's eyes never left his face. Robert held out the rifle with both hands like an offering. "It's yours," he said quietly. "Take it." For a long moment, nobody moved. Helen pressed her hand against the doorframe. Outside, the sound of Thomas's axe hitting wood had stopped. The boy must have sensed something was happening. Chato reached out and took the Winchester. His calloused hands ran along the barrel, felt the smooth stock, worked the lever action once. It made that satisfying metallic click that good rifles make. He looked at the weapon like he was reading it somehow. Then he looked at Robert. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or acknowledgement. Robert walked back to the counter, opened the drawer underneath, and pulled out a full box of .44-40 ammunition. He set it on the counter without a word. Chato picked up the ammunition box. He nodded once, just once, a small dip of his chin. Then he turned and walked toward the door. The three younger warriors followed. None of them looked back. The bell above the door jingled as they left. Through the dusty window, Robert watched them mount their horses, watched them ride off toward the hills, watched until they disappeared into the heat shimmer and sagebrush. Helen came and stood next to her husband. She didn't say anything at first, just slipped her hand into his. It was shaking a little. "We needed that money," she finally said. "Not accusing. Just stating a fact, I know," Robert replied. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know." Thomas came in from outside, his face flushed and confused. "Pa, what just happened?" "Who were those men? Did they just take our rifle?" Robert put his hand on his son's shoulder. "I gave it to them. But why? That was our best rifle. That was the one the rancher wanted." "I know, son. Then why?" Robert didn't have a good answer. At least not one he could put into words yet. He'd made a choice based on instinct, on something deeper than money or logic. Whether it was the right choice, he had no idea. That night, the Whitmore family ate a quiet dinner of beans and cornbread. They didn't talk much. They were all thinking about that Winchester rifle, wondering where it was now, what it would be used for, and what the cost of Robert's choice would really be. Outside, the desert night grew cold. A coyote called in the distance, and somewhere out there, under the same stars, Chato carried a Winchester rifle that represented something much bigger than anyone at that trading post yet understood. Part 2. The Impossible Decision. The week that followed felt like the longest of Robert's life. Every morning he woke up thinking about that Winchester rifle, about the choice he'd made, about whether he was a fool or something else entirely. Helen didn't complain, but he could see the worry in her face when she counted out the coins in their money jar. They had enough to get through maybe 2 months if they were careful. Real careful. After that, winter would come, and winter in New Mexico could be brutal. Thomas kept asking questions. What if the rancher gets angry? What if word spreads that we just give away our best merchandise? Who's going to want to do business with us then? These were good questions. Smart questions. Robert didn't have good answers. The worst part was waiting for the rancher. The man's name was Calvin Brooks, and he was due to arrive any day now. He'd sent a letter 3 weeks back saying he was coming from Texas specifically to buy that Winchester. He'd heard Robert had gotten one of the finest rifles in the territory. On the 5th day after Chato took the rifle, Calvin Brooks arrived. He rode up in a fancy buggy, pulled by 2 strong horses. Brooks himself was a big man, maybe 50, wearing expensive clothes and a hat that probably cost more than Robert's entire monthly income. He climbed down from that buggy with the confidence of someone who's used to getting what he wants. "You Whitmore?" he called out. "That's me," Robert said, stepping out from the trading post. "Good. I've been riding 4 days to get here. My back's killing me and I'm hungry, but I'm excited to see that Winchester you've been holding for me." Robert's heart sank. He hadn't been holding it. He'd given it away. To an Apache warrior. For nothing in return. "Mr. Brooks, we need to talk." The rancher's smile faded. "I don't like the sound of that." They went inside. Helen brought coffee, sensing this was going to be difficult. Robert explained what happened. He told the truth, plain and simple. 4 Apache men came in. Their leader demanded the rifle. Robert gave it to him. Brooks stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You gave it to him? Just handed over a brand new Winchester to a savage?" Robert felt his jaw tighten at that word, but he kept his voice calm. "I gave it to a man who asked for it. And I did it because refusing would have caused problems nobody needed." "Problems?" Brooks laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The problem is you're either a coward or a fool. Maybe both. I came all this way for nothing. I'm sorry for your trouble. Sorry doesn't help me, does it? Brooks stood up fast enough that his chair scraped loud against the floor. You know what? Word's going to spread about this. People need to know they can't trust you to keep your word. Can't trust you to stand up to Indians. I kept my family safe, Robert said quietly. That was my first responsibility. Your first responsibility was to honor our agreement. But I guess honor doesn't mean much out here in the middle of nowhere. Brooks stormed out, climbed into his buggy, and left without another word. The dust from his wheels hung in the air long after he was gone. Helen stood next to Robert on the porch. He's going to talk, she said. He's going to tell everyone. I know. We could lose everything. I know that too. But knowing didn't make it easier. Brooks was true to his word about spreading the story. Within 2 weeks, people in the nearest town, a place called Crossroads about 15 miles east, had heard all about it. And somehow in the telling, the story got worse. Some folks said Robert had been threatened at gunpoint. Others said he'd practically given away half his inventory to the Apache. A few even whispered that maybe Robert was in league with the tribes, maybe helping them plan raids on settlers. None of it was true. But truth doesn't matter much when people want to believe something else. The next time Robert went to town for supplies, he felt the difference immediately. Old Pete at the general store, a man he'd done business with for 5 years, barely looked at him. Need to settle your account before I extend any more credit, Pete said, not meeting Robert's eyes. Pete, you know I'm good for it. I've never missed a payment. Times are changing. Can't be too careful. At the saloon where Robert sometimes had lunch, the room went quiet when he walked in. Men who used to nod and say hello suddenly found their drinks very interesting. Only one man spoke to him, and that was Sheriff Davies, who pulled Robert aside. Look, Robert, I'm going to be straight with you. People are talking. They're saying you're too friendly with the Apache. Some are saying worse, and what do you think? The sheriff sighed. I think you did what you thought was right. But right doesn't always matter to folks who are scared. We've had 3 raids in the last 6 months. People lost family, lost homes. They see you giving rifles to Indians and they get ideas. I gave 1 rifle to 1 man to avoid bloodshed. I believe you. But beliefs are in short supply around here lately. You might want to consider moving. Head back east. Lots of folks are giving up on the territory anyway. Robert rode home that afternoon feeling like he'd been punched in the stomach. He'd spent 5 years building a life out here. 5 years of hard work and honest dealing. And now people looked at him like he was a traitor. That night, after Thomas went to bed, Helen and Robert sat at their small kitchen table by candlelight. They still had that jar of coins. Helen dumped them out and counted. $23.40. That was it. That was everything they had. We could make it through winter if nothing goes wrong, Helen said. But if the stove breaks, or if Thomas gets sick, or if business keeps dropping off. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Maybe Davies is right, Robert said. Maybe we should pack up. Head back to Missouri. Your sister would take us in until I found work. Helen reached across and took his hand. Is that what you want? No, but wanting doesn't pay bills. They sat there in silence for a while, both of them tired, both of them scared. Both of them wondering if one choice on one afternoon had destroyed everything they'd worked for. 3 more weeks passed. Business slowed to almost nothing. The few Apache who used to come by hadn't been seen. The settlers avoided the trading post. Robert spent his days organizing shelves that didn't need organizing, sweeping floors that were already clean, just trying to stay busy so he wouldn't think about how bad things had gotten. Then, on a cool October evening, they heard horses outside. Multiple horses. Robert's first thought was trouble. His hand moved toward the old Springfield he kept by the door, but Helen, looking out the window, gasped. Robert, it's Naichu. Robert stepped outside. Sure enough, there was his old acquaintance, Naichu, the Apache elder who'd traded at his post many times over the years. But he wasn't alone. There were 6 other Apache with him, and they'd brought pack horses loaded with goods. Naichu dismounted slowly. He was older, maybe 60, with silver streaking his long hair and lines of wisdom carved deep into his face. Robert Whitmore, Naichu said in his careful English. We need to talk, of course. Come inside. No, is better outside. What I say all should hear. So they gathered there in the fading light, with Helen and Thomas coming out to join them, with the Apache warriors standing respectful and quiet. And Naichu began to speak. What he said would change everything. Again. Part 3. Consequences. Unfold Naichu stood there in the gathering darkness, and his first words made Robert's blood run cold. My people have been watching you, Robert Whitmore. For many weeks now, we watched to see what kind of man you truly are. Robert glanced at the warriors behind Naichu. Their faces revealed nothing. Were they here as friends or something else? He honestly couldn't tell. 3 months ago, Naichu continued, something terrible happened. A group of our young people, mostly children, went to gather water at the spring near Red Canyon. You know this place? Robert nodded. He knew it. Everyone knew it. It was on Apache land, but close to settler territory. 6 children went that morning. 4 returned. 2 did not come home. Naichu's voice stayed steady, but Robert heard the pain underneath. We found them later, shot, left in the sun. One was Chado's younger brother, 16 years old. His name was Nako. Helen made a small sound of horror. Thomas looked at the ground. We don't know which white men did this, Naichu said. They left no sign. But it doesn't matter to some of our warriors. To them, white men are white men. All the same. All enemies. Robert felt sick. He'd heard rumors of violence near Red Canyon, but not the details. Never the details about children. Our council met for 3 days, Naichu continued. Some wanted war, wanted to strike back at the settlements. Others wanted to leave, go further into the mountains, avoid all contact with your people. The arguments were fierce. Brothers turned against brothers in those talks. The old Apache took a step closer. Chado spoke at that council. He still had grief fresh in his heart, but his words were not words of a hot-headed young man. He said maybe one test should be made. One white man should be chosen. A man with a reputation for fairness. If this man could be trusted, then maybe not all white men were the same. Maybe war could be avoided. Robert's mouth went dry. He was beginning to understand. Chado chose you, Naichu said simply. He said, I will go to Robert Whitmore's trading post. I will demand his finest weapon. If he reaches for that weapon to use it against me, we will know that all white men choose violence first. If he refuses and tries to hide behind walls and guns, we will know that white men only understand fear. But if he gives the weapon freely without being forced, then maybe, just maybe, this is a man who chooses peace over possession. The words hung in the air. Robert felt like he couldn't breathe. You passed the test, Naichu said. And because you passed it, Chado spoke again to the council. He told them what you did, how you gave the rifle without hesitation, how you even gave ammunition, how you treated the moment with respect, not fear. The council listened. The vote for war did not pass. We chose a different path. Helen had tears running down her face. Robert felt his own eyes burning. But now, Naichu said, and his voice changed, became warmer. We come to honor that choice. The council has decided something. All Apache trade in this territory. It comes to you now. Only to you. We bring the best we have. The finest furs, the strongest horses, the most beautiful crafts. This is our way of saying you are a man of honor. And we tell other bands, other tribes, other peoples. We tell them, Robert Whitmore is not our enemy. He is a man who can be trusted. One of the warriors behind Naichu stepped forward. He was carrying a large bundle wrapped in leather. He unfolded it carefully, and Robert saw it was a buffalo hide, but not just any hide. It had been painted with incredible detail. Scenes of horses and eagles, mountains and storms, all done in deep reds and blacks and yellows. This is for you, Naichu said. It tells the story of what happened. So you remember. So your family remembers. So your son can tell his children about the day peace was chosen over profit. Robert didn't know what to say. His voice came out rough and broken. I don't deserve this. I just did what felt right. That is exactly why you deserve it, Naichu replied. Any man can do right when it costs nothing. You did right when it cost you everything. That is the difference. The Apache began unloading their pack horses. They brought deer hides so soft they felt like cloth, rabbit pelts by the dozens, intricate baskets that would sell for high prices in any town, beadwork that represented hundreds of hours of careful labor. This is too much, Robert protested. I can't pay for all of this. You already paid, Naichu said. With one rifle and trust. Now we trade fair, like always. You sell these things. You keep your family fed. And when we need supplies, we come to you first. This is partnership, Robert Whitmore. This is how it should be. That night, after the Apache had made camp a respectful distance from the trading post, after the goods had been stored carefully inside, After Thomas had gone to bed with wide eyes and a head full of questions, Robert and Helen stood outside looking at the stars. "I thought we'd lost everything," Helen whispered. "We almost did. But you made the right choice." "I made the only choice I could live with," Robert corrected. "I didn't know it was right. I still don't know if I can call it right. I just knew I couldn't live with myself if I chose the other way." "That's what makes it right," Helen said, and she sounded like Naichu just then. "You didn't know it would work out. You didn't give away that rifle because you expected something in return. You did it because it was what your heart told you to do." The next few weeks brought changes Robert never anticipated. The Apache came regularly now, always with goods to trade, always respectful, always fair. Word spread through the Apache bands across the territory. The trading post that used to see maybe 1 or 2 Apache visits a month now saw them almost daily. But while some things got better, others got worse. The settlers and townspeople didn't see this the same way. They heard that Robert's trading post was full of Indians now. They heard that he was doing more business with the tribes than with his own people. And in their fear and anger, they made up stories. Robert was selling guns to the Apache. Robert was giving them information about settlement locations. Robert was probably Apache himself. Maybe had an Indian wife before Helen. Maybe couldn't be trusted at all. None of it was true. Every bit of it was believed by someone. Calvin Brooks, the rancher who'd come for the Winchester, he was particularly vocal. He told everyone who'd listened that Robert Whitmore was a coward, who'd probably wet himself when an Indian looked at him wrong. Said the man couldn't be trusted to stand up for his own people. The talk got so bad that Sheriff Davies rode out to the trading post one afternoon to have another conversation. "It's getting ugly in town," Davies said, accepting a cup of coffee from Helen. "Real ugly. Some of the younger men are talking about doing something about your Indian problem." "I don't have an Indian problem," Robert said. "I have a people problem. Folks who can't see past their own hate? Maybe so. But hate or not, they might ride out here. Might try to scare off your Apache customers. Might try to burn you out. I can't protect you all the time, Robert. I've got a whole county to watch." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying be careful. Real careful. Things are balanced on a knife's edge right now. One wrong move and it all falls apart." The sheriff left and Robert stood there thinking about those words. Balanced on a knife's edge. That's exactly what it felt like. The test was coming. He could feel it. And this time there would be no good choices, no clear path. Just danger from every direction. And a family caught in the middle of something much bigger than one man's choice to give away a rifle. The storm was building. The only question was when it would break. Part 4. The revelation November brought cold winds and short days. Business at the trading post was strange now. The Apache came regularly, but settlers avoided the place like it was cursed. Robert's money situation improved because of the high-quality goods the tribes brought, but his reputation among his own people crumbled day by day. Thomas noticed it worst when he went to town. Boys his own age, kids he'd known for years, wouldn't talk to him anymore. One afternoon he came home with a split lip and bruised knuckles. "What happened?" Helen asked, reaching for a cloth to clean his face. "Billy Peterson called Pa a traitor," Thomas said, his voice tight with anger. "Said our whole family was disgraceful. I hit him." Robert, who'd been sorting inventory, came over. "Did you win?" "Pa, that's not the point. Did you win?" Thomas looked at the floor. "He hit me back pretty good." "Then you both lost," Robert said. "Fighting about this doesn't solve anything. It just makes the divide bigger. So what am I supposed to do? Just let people say those things about you? You're supposed to live your life in a way that makes their words look foolish. You're supposed to be so obviously decent that their lies can't stick. Fighting proves nothing except that fists hurt." Thomas didn't look convinced, but he nodded. That night, lying in bed, Robert told Helen his real worry. The boy's going to grow up caught between two worlds. Not fully accepted by either side. That's a hard way to live. "Maybe," Helen said. "Or maybe he'll be one of the few who can bridge both worlds. Maybe that's exactly what this territory needs. People who can see past the color of skin and the language someone speaks. You're more optimistic than me. One of us has to be." December came with the first real snow. Robert was in the barn feeding the horses when he heard voices from the trading post. Multiple voices. He grabbed his coat and hurried back. Inside he found Naichu and 2 other Apache elders he didn't recognize. But what surprised him was seeing Sheriff Davies there too, along with a cavalry officer in full uniform. "Robert," Davy said, "this is Captain William Morris from Fort Stanton. He needs to talk to you." The captain was maybe 35 with sharp eyes and a military bearing that suggested he didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Mr. Whitmore, I've received reports that you're trading weapons to hostile Apache. I'm here to investigate." Robert's stomach dropped. This was it. This was the storm breaking. "I don't trade weapons," Robert said carefully. "I gave one rifle to one man months ago, and that was to prevent violence, not encourage it." "That's not what I've heard. I've heard you're running a regular supply operation for the tribes." "Then you've heard wrong." The captain looked around the trading post. "I'm going to need to search this building. And your home. If you're innocent, you have nothing to worry about." The search took 2 hours. Captain Morris and 4 soldiers went through everything. Every crate, every drawer, every corner. They counted the rifles Robert had for sale. 3 of them, all legal, all documented with proper papers. They searched the barn, the shed, even the family's private quarters. Helen stood with her arms crossed, watching strange men paw through her personal belongings. Thomas looked angry enough to spit. Robert just tried to stay calm and cooperative. Finally, Captain Morris came back to the main room. "I found no evidence of illegal weapons trading," he said, though he didn't sound particularly happy about it. "But Mr. Whitmore, I'm going to be frank with you. Your relationship with the Apache is unusual. It's causing concern. People are scared, and scared people do stupid things. I trade fairly with everyone who comes through that door," Robert said. "Apache, Mexican, white settler, doesn't matter. A man's money is the same color no matter what he looks like. Noble sentiment. But these aren't noble times. There's talk of more raids, talk of the tribes getting organized. If you're seen as someone who enables them, you become a target, for both sides." One of the Apache elders, a man named Delgado who'd been silent until now, spoke up in surprisingly good English. "Captain Morris, may I speak?" The captain looked surprised but nodded. "This man," Delgado pointed at Robert, "he is not our friend because he gives us things. He is our friend because he gives us respect. That is rare. You come here with soldiers looking for weapons, looking for proof that we are savages who cannot be trusted. But you find nothing because there is nothing to find. The only weapons here are the ones Robert Whitmore sells legally to white men, yet you still speak to him like he is guilty of something." Morris stiffened. "I'm doing my job." "And we are doing ours," Delgado replied. "Trying to live, trying to feed our families, trying to find white men who see us as human beings. Robert Whitmore is one of the few. You should protect him, not investigate him." The words hung in the air. Sheriff Davies shifted uncomfortably. The captain looked like he'd bitten into something sour. "I'll note your statement in my report," Morris said finally. "But my recommendation stands. Mr. Whitmore, you'd be wise to be more careful about appearances. Perception matters as much as truth in situations like these." After the soldiers left, Naichu stayed behind with the other elders. They looked troubled. "This will get worse," Naichu said. "The army is watching now. The settlers are watching. Everyone is watching. What should I do?" Robert asked. "Keep being who you are," Naichu said. "But understand that we may bring danger to your door simply by coming here. Some of our young men, the ones who wanted war, they grow frustrated. They see soldiers searching the home of the one white man who treats us fair, and it angers them. They say, 'See, even treating them well means nothing. They still suspect us. They still hunt us.' Are you saying I shouldn't trade with you anymore?" "No," Delgado said firmly. "We are saying you should know what you risk. And we are saying that if danger comes because of us, we will stand with you. That is honor. That is what Chato's test was really about, finding a white man who understands honor so we can honor him in return." That night, after everyone left, after Thomas went to bed, Robert sat with Helen in the kitchen. The painted buffalo hide hung on the wall now, and in the candlelight the figures seemed to move. "Are you scared?" Helen asked. "Terrified," Robert admitted. "I feel like I'm standing in the middle of a river during flood season. The water's rising on both sides, and I don't know which way to go that doesn't end with us drowning. But you're still standing. For now. That's all any of us can do. Stand for as long as we can. Hope the flood passes before it takes us under." 3 days later, Thomas came running from town with news. Calvin Brooks had been talking in the saloon again, getting men worked up, talking about how the Apache problem needed to be solved, and maybe it started with solving the Robert Whitmore problem. "He's planning something, Pa," Thomas said, out of breath from running. "I heard him tell 5 or 6 men to be ready. Said they were going to send a message that collaborating with Indians comes with a price. Robert felt ice in his veins. When? I don't know. Soon, I think. Helen started packing. Water, food, blankets. Preparing for the possibility they might need to run. Robert loaded both the Springfield and the Henry rifle, something he'd never done before. That night, they didn't sleep. They waited, watched, listened for the sound of horses or the smell of smoke. But the attack didn't come that night. Or the next. Sometimes Robert thought waiting for the storm is worse than the storm itself. The not knowing. The constant tension. The way every shadow looks like a threat and every sound makes you jump. The storm was still building. And when it finally broke, it would test everything Robert believed about honor, about choices, about whether one man's attempt at decency could survive in a world bent on hate. The answer was coming. Whether Robert was ready for it or not. Part 5, The Unexpected. Alliance winter deepened, and with it came a strange sort of calm. Days passed without incident, then weeks. The threatened attack from Brooks and his followers never materialized. Maybe the presence of Captain Morris and the Army's attention had made them think twice, or maybe they were just waiting for a better moment. Robert didn't trust the quiet, but he used it. He kept working, kept trading, kept treating every person who walked through his door with the same fairness. And slowly, something unexpected began to happen. The trading post became more than just a place to buy supplies. It became something else. A neutral ground, a rare place where Apache and settlers could be in the same space without violence. It started small. An Apache woman came to trade baskets, and while she was there, a settler's wife arrived needing thread and needles. The two women eyed each other nervously at first, but Helen, bless her heart, she started talking to both of them like it was the most natural thing in the world. Asked the settler woman about her children. Asked the Apache woman about her weaving technique. Before long, the settler woman was examining the baskets with genuine interest. "How do you get them so tight?" she asked through Helen's translation. "Mine always have gaps," the Apache woman showed her. Right there in the trading post, she demonstrated the technique. The settler woman watched carefully, asking questions. When she left, she bought 2 of the baskets and thanked the Apache woman with actual respect in her voice. It was a small thing. Maybe it meant nothing, but maybe it meant everything. Thomas started spending more time with the Apache who came to trade. Naichu, seeing the boy's interest, began teaching him words in their language. At first, Thomas struggled. The sounds were different from anything he'd learned. But he kept trying, and gradually he started to understand. One afternoon, Robert found his son sitting with a young Apache man named Victor, both of them laughing about something. "What's funny?" Robert asked. "I told him my name," Thomas said, grinning. "And he said in our language, Thomas sounds like the word for rabbit. So now everyone's calling me Rabbit Boy. You okay with that?" Thomas shrugged. "It's better than Trader's Son." The boy had a point. By February, the trading post was doing better business than it ever had. The Apache brought consistent, high-quality goods. Settlers from further away, people who didn't care about the local politics, they started coming too. They'd heard about the fine furs and craft work available. Money flowed steadily. Robert was able to fix the roof. Buy Helen that new stove she'd needed for 2 years. Put away actual savings for the first time in forever. It should have felt like success, and it did mostly. But there was always that underlying tension, that knowledge that not everyone was happy with how things were going. Calvin Brooks was one of those people. He watched the trading post's success with growing bitterness. He'd lost family in an Apache raid 5 years back, and that grief had turned into something dark and poisonous. In his mind, any white person who dealt with Indians was betraying the memory of everyone who died. Brooks started talking more openly in town, calling Robert a collaborator, saying the trading post was probably where the Apache planned their raids. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter to people who wanted to believe the worst. One evening in March, Sheriff Davies rode out to warn Robert again. "Brooks is getting louder, more insistent. He's got maybe 10 men who agree with him now. They're calling themselves the Territorial Justice Committee." "Justice," Robert said bitterly. "That's what they're calling it? They say someone needs to stand up for white settlers. Say you're making money off Indian trade while good Christian families live in fear." "I'm a good Christian family too," Helen said from the doorway. "Or don't we count anymore?" Davies had the decency to look uncomfortable. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. These men are angry, and angry men do stupid things. Watch yourself. Maybe send Helen and Thomas to stay in town for a while. I'm not leaving, Helen said firmly. This is our home. After the sheriff left, Robert paced the floor, thinking. Thomas sat at the table practicing his Apache words. He'd gotten quite good at it now. Sometimes when the Apache traders came by, they'd joke with him in their own language and he'd joke back. It was remarkable, really, how quickly the boy had adapted, how easily he'd started seeing people as just people, not as categories or threats. Pa, Thomas said, looking up from his paper. If Brooks comes, what are we going to do? I don't know, son. Will we fight? I hope not. Fighting just makes everything worse, but if we have to, Robert sat down across from his son, then we protect ourselves. But we don't go looking for it. We don't provoke it. And if there's any way to avoid it, we take that path, always. The attack came 4 nights later, and it came in the worst possible time. A group of Apache, including Naichu and Chato himself, had arrived late in the afternoon. They'd brought early spring furs and wanted to trade for supplies before heading to higher ground for the season. They'd made camp about 100 yards from the trading post like they usually did, respectful of the Whitmore's space but close enough to be safe. Robert had invited Naichu and Chato to share dinner. It was something they'd started doing occasionally. Helen would cook and they'd all sit together talking about hunting, weather, the land. Thomas would practice his language skills and everyone would laugh when he got words hilariously wrong. They were finishing a meal of venison stew when they heard the horses. Too many horses moving too fast. Robert stood up immediately. Get away from the windows. Through the glass he could see torches, maybe 8 or 10 of them, riders coming up the trail at a gallop. Chato moved to the door, but Robert put a hand on his arm. Wait, let me see what they want. We know what they want, Chato said quietly. The riders stopped in front of the trading post. Calvin Brooks sat at the front, a torch in one hand, a rifle across his saddle. The men with him were all armed, all angry-looking. Behind them, Robert could see more torches heading toward where the Apache had camped. Whitmore, Brooks shouted. Come out here. Robert stepped onto the porch. Helen tried to follow, but he motioned for her to stay inside. What do you want, Brooks? What do I want? I want you to explain why you're having dinner with savages while decent folk have to sleep with rifles by their beds. I'm having dinner with my friends in my home, which is none of your business. It's everyone's business when you're harboring Indians on white land. This is my land. I'll have whoever I want on it. Brooks raised his rifle, not quite pointing it at Robert, but close. You've made your choice then. You've chosen them over your own kind. I've chosen to treat people with respect. If that bothers you, that's your problem, not mine. It was the wrong thing to say, or maybe the right thing, depending on how you looked at it, but it was the thing that made Brooks snap. Boys, he shouted to his men, burn the barn. 2 riders peeled off, heading toward the small barn where Robert kept his horses and stored hay. They were carrying torches and had clearly come prepared. No, Thomas burst out of the trading post, running toward the barn. Thomas, stop, Robert shouted, but the boy didn't listen. Everything happened fast after that. The riders lit the barn. Flames caught in the dry hay immediately, spreading with terrifying speed. Thomas reached the barn door, trying to get the horses out before they panicked. Helen ran after their son. Robert started down from the porch, but Brooks swung his rifle up, now definitely pointing it at Robert. Stay right there, Indian lover. And that's when Chato and the other Apache stepped out onto the porch. 5 of them all armed with rifles. Not the Winchester that started this whole thing, but good rifles nonetheless. The men with Brooks saw them and brought their own weapons up. Suddenly there were guns pointing in every direction. The barn blazed behind them. Horses screamed inside. Thomas and Helen were somewhere in that chaos, trying to save the animals. And Robert stood there in the middle of everything, knowing that one wrong word, one wrong move, and people were going to die. Maybe his own family. Maybe the Apache who'd come here trusting his hospitality. Maybe Brooks and his men, leaving more widows and orphans to feed the cycle of hate. The moment balanced on the edge of a knife, one breath away from catastrophe, and Robert was the only one who could possibly stop it. Part 6, the crisis time seemed to stop. Fire roared behind them. Guns pointed in every direction. The sound of horses screaming cut through the night, and everyone waited to see who would pull a trigger first. Robert held up both hands empty, visible to everyone. Nobody shoots, he said. his voice carrying over the chaos. Nobody. Tell your Indian friends to lower their weapons, Brooks snarled. I'll do no such thing. You came onto my property with torches and rifles. You burned my barn. They have every right to defend themselves. They're savages. They're men, Robert said firmly. Same as you. And right now they're showing more restraint than you are. Behind the barn, Thomas emerged from the smoke, coughing, leading 2 terrified horses. Helen came right after with the 3rd. They were both covered in soot and ash, but alive. Thank God, alive. One of Brooks's men, a younger fellow named Peter, he lowered his rifle slightly. Calvin, maybe we should go. We made our point. The point isn't made until these Indians leave. Brooks shot back. Chato spoke then. His English rough, but clear enough. We leave when we choose. Not when white man who burns buildings tells us, you threatening me, Indian? No threat. Truth. You come to friends' home with fire and guns. Who is savage here? The question hung in the air. Some of Brooks's men looked uncomfortable now. They'd come ready to scare Robert, maybe rough him up a little. But burning a barn with a kid inside? That was different. That crossed a line that some of them weren't comfortable with. Robert saw the uncertainty and pressed it. Brooks, you've done enough damage for one night. You've broken the law. You've destroyed property. Sheriff Davies will hear about this, and so will Captain Morris. You want the Army involved in your Justice Committee? That gave Brooks pause. The Army was one thing he couldn't fight. But his pride wouldn't let him back down entirely. This isn't over, Whitmore. Not by a long shot. You keep dealing with Indians, you keep taking their side, and next time we won't just burn a barn. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Brooks pulled his horse around hard, nearly making it stumble. His men followed, some of them quickly, others more slowly. Peter looked back once, and Robert could see something in his face. Shame, maybe, or doubt. They rode off into the darkness, leaving behind the smell of smoke and burned wood and fear. As soon as they were out of sight, Robert ran to the barn. It was too late to save the building. The whole structure was engulfed, flames shooting high into the night sky. But at least the horses were out. At least nobody had died. Helen had her arms around Thomas, checking him for injuries. The boy's face was black with soot. His hands burned in a few places where he'd grabbed hot wood. But otherwise he was whole. You could have been killed, Helen said, her voice shaking between anger and relief. The horses, Thomas said simply. I couldn't let them burn. Chato and the other Apache had lowered their rifles but hadn't put them away. They stood watching the fire, faces grim. I am sorry, Naichu said, coming to stand beside Robert. This happened because of us. No, Robert said firmly. This happened because some men choose hate over sense. That's not your fault. But it is our presence that gave them excuse. They would have found an excuse anyway. That's what men like Brooks do. They find reasons to justify what they already wanted to do. They watched the barn burn. There was nothing to do but let it go. Too far gone to save. And the night too dark to see clearly anyway. Best to just make sure the fire didn't spread to anything else. The Apache stayed the whole night. They helped create a fire break, clearing brush and hauling water from the well to wet down the ground around the other buildings. They worked alongside Robert and Thomas, all of them covered in ash and sweat, all of them too tired to talk much. By dawn, the barn was just charred timbers and smoking ruins. Robert stood looking at it, calculating in his head. That barn represented maybe $300 to rebuild. $300 he didn't have, even with the good trading lately. Helen brought him coffee as the sun came up. She looked exhausted, her face lined with worry and soot. What are we going to do? Rebuild, Robert said. What else can we do? With what money? And what happens when Brooks comes back? I don't know, Helen, I honestly don't know. Chato approached them, his face serious. Robert Whitmore, I must speak with you. They walked a little away from the others. The Apache warrior looked at the destroyed barn, then at Robert. This is my fault. No, it's not. Yes, I demanded rifle. I created the test. Because of that test, you have enemies now. White men who see you as traitor. This is the result of my actions. Robert was too tired to argue. Chato, I made my choice. Nobody forced me. I live with the consequences, same as you live with yours. Even so, I have debt to you. Chato paused, choosing his words carefully. In my culture, when someone pays a great cost because of our actions, we must balance it. Must make it right. I will help you rebuild. My people will help, and I will return something to you, something I have kept since the day you gave it to me. He walked to where his horse was tied, reached into his pack and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. When he unwrapped it, Robert saw the Winchester rifle. The one he'd given away 6 months ago. The one that had started everything. This was always meant to come back, Chato said. But only after you proved what kind of man you were. Test was not just about giving rifle. Was about whether you gave it freely without expecting return. Without demanding payment. You passed that test. Now rifle comes home. Robert took the Winchester with shaking hands. It was clean, well-maintained, obviously cared for. But more than the physical weapon, it represented something bigger. Completion of a circle. Proof that honor mattered. I can't accept this, Robert said, though his hands held the rifle tight. You must. Is part of the balance. You gave freely, now receive freely. This is our way. Thomas came over, staring at the rifle in his father's hands. Pa, is that the Winchester? The one you gave to Chato? Yes, he's giving it back. Apparently. The boy looked at Chato with something like wonder. I thought once you gave something away, it was gone forever. Sometimes, Chato said, understanding enough English to catch the meaning. But some things they meant to circle back. Just takes time. Over the next few days, word spread about what Brooks had done, and reactions were mixed. Some folks in town thought he'd gone too far. Burning property crossed a line, especially with a kid nearly trapped inside. Others thought he hadn't gone far enough. Sheriff Davies rode out on the 3rd day after the burning. He looked tired and frustrated. I talked to Brooks. He admitted to burning your barn. Says it was justified property destruction to send a message. What kind of message requires burning down a man's barn? Robert asked. The kind sent by a fool, Davies said. I can't arrest him, though. Not enough support from the town council. They see it as a dispute between neighbors, not a criminal act. He threatened my family. I know. And I told him if he comes back here, if he makes another move against you, I will arrest him. But Robert, you need to understand something. There's maybe 40% of folks who think what Brooks did was wrong. There's another 40% who think he did the right thing. And the last 20% don't want to get involved either way. That's not enough support for me to take action against a man who has friends and money. So he just gets away with it. For now. But that might change. What do you mean? Davies smiled slightly. Seems Captain Morris heard about what happened. Seems he's not too happy that a civilian group is taking justice into their own hands in his territory. He's coming here next week to talk to you. And to Brooks. Military law is different from civilian law. Morris has more authority than I do. After Davies left, Robert felt the smallest bit of hope. Maybe the captain would do something. Maybe there was still law out here in the territory, even if it wore a blue uniform. The Apache kept their word. They brought timber cut from the mountains. They brought strong backs and willing hands. Within 2 weeks, a new barn stood where the old one had burned. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid. And it was built with help from people who'd proven themselves true friends. On the day they finished, Naichu made a small ceremony. He burned sage and said words in Apache that Thomas translated. May this place stand strong. May those who built it be honored. May the fire that destroyed be answered by the building that protects. That night, the Whitmores ate dinner alone for the first time in weeks, just the 3 of them, tired and sore and proud of what they'd accomplished together with their unlikely allies. Pa, Thomas said, what happens when Captain Morris comes? I tell him the truth. That's all I can do. And if he doesn't help, then we keep doing what we've been doing. We treat people right. We work hard. We hope that eventually more folks see sense than see hate. Helen reached across and squeezed Robert's hand. We've made it this far. We have. Then we'll make it further. One day at a time. One choice at a time. Outside, the new barn stood dark against the stars. Inside, 3 people who'd lost everything and gained something more valuable sat together. Not knowing what tomorrow would bring, but knowing they'd face it together. And somewhere in the mountains, an Apache warrior cleaned a Winchester rifle and thought about honor. About testing, about white men who surprised you. Part 7. The unexpected resolution. Captain William Morris arrived on a Tuesday morning with 6 soldiers. He wasn't smiling. Robert met him outside the trading post, Helen and Thomas standing nearby. The new barn gleamed in the spring sunlight, obvious evidence of recent construction. Mr. Whitmore, Morris said, dismounting. I see you've rebuilt. With help from friends, Robert replied. Apache friends, I'm told. Friends are friends, Captain. I don't sort them by categories. Morris walked around the property, examining everything with the careful eye of a military man. He looked at where the old barn had stood, still marked by charred earth. He looked at the new structure. He made notes in a small book he carried. "Tell me exactly what happened the night of March 15th. Robert told the story straight. Calvin Brooks, the riders, the threats, the burning barn, Thomas nearly trapped inside, the Apache who'd been having dinner as guests who'd come out armed but held their fire. The standoff that could have ended in bloodshed but didn't. Morris wrote it all down. And Brooks admitted to burning the barn? To Sheriff Davies, yes. Said it was justified. Justified, Morris repeated flatly. He closed his notebook. There's nothing justified about burning a man's property because you don't like his choice of trading partners. That's arson at best. Attempted murder at worst, considering your son was inside. Sheriff said he couldn't arrest Brooks. Not enough support. The sheriff answers to the territorial government. I answer to the United States Army. Different chain of command. Morris looked at the barn again. I'm going to speak with Mr. Brooks. But first I want to speak with your Apache friends. Can that be arranged? I can send word to Naichu. Whether he comes is his choice. Fair enough. That afternoon, Naichu arrived with Chato. They didn't come armed this time, showing respect for the captain's presence. Morris sat with them on the porch of the trading post with Robert translating where needed, though Naichu's English was good enough for most of it. I need to understand something, Morris said. Why are you willing to help this man? Why put yourselves at risk when relations between your people and settlers are already strained? Naichu thought about this. Captain, do you know what honor means? I'm a military man. I understand honor. Then you understand why we help Robert Whitmore. He showed honor when it cost him everything. He gave valuable thing without being forced, without knowing if he would ever be repaid. This is rare. In white men, in any man. When you find someone with true honor, you protect that. Because if men like Robert Whitmore are destroyed for doing right, then what hope is there for peace? Chato spoke up, his English still rough but passionate. My people, we angry. White men killed children, took our lands, broke every promise. Many warriors want war, want revenge. But I said maybe not all white men same, maybe one good one exist. I tested Robert Whitmore, he passed. Because he passed, war was stopped. Many lives saved, white and Apache both. You understand? Morris was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer. I lost men to Apache raids, good men, friends. I'm not going to pretend I have warm feelings toward your people. We lost children to white men, Chato said simply. I not pretend warm feelings either, but we have choice. Keep killing until everyone dead or find people who build bridges instead of burn them. Robert Whitmore is bridge. We protect bridges. They rare, they valuable. The captain nodded slowly. I'm going to ask you something and I want an honest answer. Are you planning any hostile actions against settlers? Are you using this trading post to gather information for raids? No, Naichu said firmly. We trade here because we trust here. We bring furs and crafts, we take supplies, we go home. Same as anyone else. Robert Whitmore never asks about settler locations. Never asks about our camps. We talk about weather, about hunting, about our families. Nothing more. And if I had to defend his character, his loyalty to peace, could I count on you to speak to that? Yes, we would speak for him. To Army, to anyone who listens. Robert Whitmore is a good man in bad situation. He should not suffer for being good. Morris stood up and shook hands with both Apache men. It was a small gesture, but Robert saw how much it meant. Recognition. Respect between two groups who usually only met over gun sights. After Naichu and Chato left, Morris turned to Robert. I'm going to town now. I'll speak with Brooks and his men. I'm also going to speak with the town council. And I'm going to make something very clear. This territory is under military jurisdiction until statehood is granted. That means my law applies. And under my law, vigilante justice is a crime. So is arson. So is threatening civilians. Brooks has friends in town, Robert warned. So do I. They wear uniforms and carry rifles legally. I'll handle Brooks. True to his word, Morris rode into town that afternoon. What happened there became the stuff of local legend, told and retold in saloons and around fires for years after. The captain found Brooks in the saloon, holding court with his supporters, bragging about how he'd taught that Indian lover a lesson. Morris walked in with 3 soldiers and a presence that made the whole room go quiet. Calvin Brooks? Morris asked, though he knew exactly who he was. That's me. Who's asking? Captain William Morris, United States Army. You're under arrest for arson and destruction of property. Brooks laughed. On whose authority? Mine, and the United States government's, which supersedes any local authority you think protects you. You can't arrest me. I'm a citizen with rights. You're a criminal who burned a man's barn with a child inside. Your rights ended when you lit that torch. Now you can come peacefully or my men can drag you. Your choice. Brooks looked around the room expecting support. Some of his friends stood up, hands moving toward guns. But the soldiers already had their rifles ready. The odds were clear. Peter, the young man who'd seemed doubtful during the barn burning, he stood up too, but not to support Brooks. Captain, I was there that night. I saw what happened. Calvin said we were just going to scare Whitmore. Maybe fire some shots in the air. I didn't know he was going to burn the barn. When I saw the kid running in there, I tried to stop him. Others did too, but Calvin wouldn't listen. That true? Morris asked the room. Several men nodded. The unity Brooks had counted on was crumbling. Fear of the army, maybe, or maybe just recognition that burning buildings with kids inside crossed a line that even hate couldn't justify. Brooks saw he was alone. This is wrong. That man's a traitor to his own kind. That man is a merchant conducting legal business. You're a criminal who took the law into his own hands. Now, are you coming peacefully? Brooks came peacefully. He didn't have much choice. Morris arrested him and 2 others who'd been most active in the burning. The rest were let go with warnings that any further vigilante action would result in military prison time. The story spread fast. By evening, everyone in the territory knew that Captain Morris had arrested Calvin Brooks. Reactions were mixed, but mostly people were just shocked that someone had actually enforced the law. 3 days later, Morris returned to the trading post. Brooks will stand trial. Military tribunal, not civilian court. He's looking at serious time in a military prison. Thank you, Robert said, meaning it deeply. Don't thank me yet. This doesn't solve your bigger problem. Half the territory still thinks you're too friendly with the Apache. The other half sees you as a bridge builder. That division doesn't go away just because I arrested one man. I know. But at least there's some justice. There is. Morris paused. I'm going to recommend something to the territorial governor. I'm going to suggest that your trading post be designated as an official neutral ground, a place where Apache and settlers can trade without fear of violence from either side. If the governor agrees, you'd have military protection. Anyone who attacks you or your business would face federal charges. Robert felt hope bloom in his chest. Would he really do that? He might. The territory needs success stories. Needs proof that coexistence is possible. You're that proof. Now, whether the designation comes through or not, I'm going to make sure my patrols come by here regularly. Consider it unofficial protection until the official kind catches up. After Morris left, Robert sat on his porch with Helen and Thomas. The sun was setting, painting the sky in reds and golds. The new barn stood solid against the horizon. Life felt almost normal again. Pa, Thomas said, did we win? I don't think it's about winning or losing, son. It's about surviving, and choosing every day to be decent despite pressure to be otherwise. But Brooks is arrested. The captain is protecting us. That's winning, isn't it? It's progress, Helen said, which is sometimes better than winning. Winning suggests it's over. Progress means we're moving the right direction, even if there's still road ahead. That night, Robert hung the Winchester rifle above the door of the trading post, not as a weapon to be used, but as a symbol of what could happen when people chose honor over hate, trust over fear, building over burning. The rifle that had started everything, that had been given away and returned, now stood as a reminder. Sometimes the hardest choices, the ones that cost the most in the moment, they circle back around. They come home transformed into something better than they were when they left. And sometimes, just sometimes, one man's decision to give up what he values most can change the course of history for everyone. Part 8, the ending no one saw coming. 5 months passed. Summer came to the New Mexico territory with its familiar heat and dust. The trading post thrived. Word of Captain Morris's intervention spread, and more people started coming, both Apache and settlers. Some came just to see the place where the division between two worlds seemed a little less sharp. The territorial governor, after much deliberation, had granted the neutral ground designation. A small sign now hung outside the trading post. Official neutral trading ground, protected by order of the Territory of New Mexico. It wasn't much, just words on a board, but it meant something. It meant law recognized what Robert had built. Calvin Brooks was serving 3 years in a military prison. His supporters had scattered, most of them embarrassed now about their involvement. Peter, the young man who'd testified, he'd even come by once to apologize to Robert personally, said he'd gotten caught up in fear and hate. But seeing that barn burn with Thomas inside had woken him up to what he'd become. Thomas was 17 now, nearly a man. His Apache language skills had improved so much that he often served as translator when complex discussions needed to happen. But more than that, he'd become a bridge between worlds in a way his father never could. He could sit with Apache warriors and joke like they'd known each other forever. He could go to town and talk to settlers without getting into fights. He existed comfortably in both spaces. One August evening, Chato arrived at the trading post with Naichu and several other Apache elders. They looked serious, ceremonial almost. Robert invited them inside, offered coffee, but Chato declined. "We come to speak of something important," Chato said. His English had improved significantly. Something that could change everything or could fail badly. "We need your wisdom, Robert Whitmore." They sat on the porch, the evening cooling around them. Naichu spoke first. "Our young people, they grow up in hard times. They learn to fight, to hunt, to survive. But they do not learn white man's language well. They do not learn numbers, writing, the things that white man's world requires. We see the future coming. We see that Apache must learn to live in white man's world, or we will not survive." Robert listened carefully, sensing this was building to something big. At the same time, Chato continued, "White children, they learn white ways, but they do not learn the land. Do not learn to track, to read weather, to survive without towns and stores. They do not learn respect for earth that provides everything. These are Apache skills, skills that made us survive for thousands of years." "We have idea," Naichu said. "Dangerous idea maybe, but maybe good idea too." He paused, measuring his words. "What if we teach each other's children? Apache elders teach settler children about land, about survival, about medicine plants, about reading stars. And you, Robert Whitmore and Helen and others who are willing, you teach Apache children English, numbers, writing, the things they will need for future that is coming whether we want it or not." Robert sat back, stunned. "You're talking about a school, a shared school. Not school like white men make," Chato said quickly. "Not place where one culture destroys other. Place where both cultures share knowledge, where children learn together, respect each other, become people who can live in both worlds." "This has never been done," Robert said. "At least not that I know of." "That is why it is a dangerous idea," Naichu agreed.
"Many white people will hate it."
"Say we corrupt their children. Many Apache will hate it too. Say we betray our ways. But we believe it is necessary. And we believe if anyone can make it work, it is you." Helen had come out onto the porch and heard the last part. "You want us to help start this?" "Not just help, lead. You would teach Apache children. We would teach settler children. Here at Trading Post, neutral ground. Protected by Army. Safe place for learning." Robert and Helen looked at each other. This was bigger than anything they'd considered. This was taking the bridge they'd built and turning it into a highway. This was radical and dangerous and possibly brilliant. "I'll need to think about this," Robert said. "Talk to Helen and Thomas. This affects them too. Of course, take time. But know this, Robert Whitmore, we do not ask this lightly. We ask because we trust you, because you proved yourself when you gave rifle, because you stood with us when white men burned your barn, because you show every day that peace is possible. Now we ask, will you help make peace last for next generation?" After the Apache left, the Whitmore family talked long into the night. The risks were enormous. They could lose the fragile acceptance they'd gained, could become targets again, could fail entirely and make relations worse. But the opportunity was equally enormous. To raise a generation of children who saw each other as people first, not as categories or threats. To create understanding that might prevent the wars and raids and burnings that had plagued the territory for decades. "I want to do it," Thomas said. "I want to help teach. I'm not smart like Ma, but I know both languages now. I could help translate, and I could show the settler kids that Apache people are just people, that they're not scary once you know them." "It could put you in danger," Robert warned. "Pa, I've already been in danger. We all have. At least this danger comes from trying to build something good, not from just trying to survive." Helen smiled at her son, pride shining in her eyes. "When did you grow up so wise?" I had good teachers. Both kinds. Robert made his decision. All right. We'll do it. We'll try. The next morning he sent word to Chato and Naichu. The answer was yes. What followed was months of careful planning. They started small. Just 3 Apache children and 2 settler children. Helen taught basic English and arithmetic in the mornings. In the afternoons, an Apache elder named Grandfather Wolf taught tracking and plant identification. They met at the trading post 3 times a week. The first day was awkward. The children eyed each other suspiciously. But children are children, and curiosity eventually wins over fear. Within 2 weeks, they were laughing together. Within a month, they were friends. Word spread. Some parents were horrified. But others, tired of the constant tension and violence, they saw hope. By winter, there were 8 children in the program. By spring of 1887, there were 15. Captain Morris visited regularly, his presence a reminder that this experiment had official protection. He even brought his own children once, 2 boys who were fascinated by everything they learned. Not everyone approved. There were still settlers who muttered about Indian sympathizers. Still Apache who thought the old ways were being betrayed. But the children kept coming. And slowly, something remarkable happened. The children who learned together started bringing their families together. An Apache mother would come to pick up her daughter and end up talking to a settler mother about recipes. A settler father would arrive early and watch in amazement as Grandfather Wolf taught his son to read animal tracks in the dirt. Barriers that had seemed permanent started to crack. Thomas, now 18, had become the unofficial leader of the whole thing. He'd bridge the gap between cultures effortlessly, making jokes that worked in both languages, explaining customs that confused either side, helping everyone feel welcome. One afternoon in June of 1887, Robert stood watching the children play outside after lessons. Apache kids and settler kids racing and laughing and arguing about who was fastest, exactly like kids anywhere, and he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Real hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of survival, but the solid hope of something actually working. Chato came to stand beside him. "You see this?" he said, gesturing at the children. "This is what I hoped for when I demanded the rifle. This is the big choice, and what do you mean?" "In my language, when I said give me the big one, I did not mean big rifle. I meant big choice. The phrase sounds same in Apache, but meaning is different. I was asking you to make big choice. Peace or weapon, future or past. You chose peace. You chose future. This," he pointed at the playing children, "this is result of that choice." Robert stared at him. "You mean it was never about the rifle at all?" "Rifle was symbol. Test was real. You could have kept weapon, killed Apache who threatened you and felt justified. Many white men would choose this. But you gave away weapon, gave away power, chose to be vulnerable instead of strong. This is true strength. This is why we trust you." Robert laughed, a sound of wonder and disbelief. "I've spent 2 years thinking it was about that Winchester. Winchester was important. But choice was more important. What you gave up, what you chose instead, this is what mattered." They stood together in companionable silence, watching the future play out before them in the form of children who didn't yet understand how remarkable what they were doing really was. 5 years later, in 1891, a photographer came through the territory documenting frontier life. He'd heard about the unusual school at Whitmore's trading post and wanted to capture it. The photograph he took that day would end up in museums and history books. It showed Robert and Helen, older now, gray touching their hair, standing in front of the trading post. Around them stood a mixture of Apache and settler families. Children of both cultures played in the foreground, some mid-motion, all clearly comfortable with each other. Thomas stood next to a young Apache woman named Kiona, daughter of Chato. They were holding hands, and though no one said it out loud yet, everyone knew they'd be married by